How many times have you been in trouble with the Presbyterian?
Um, Probably like four, formal times when somebody would file. And I never guessed that the church would rise up the way it did and make it their own. I mean, I didn't expect to survive, the trials and hearings and things. I thought that this was, a sacrifice that I was making, but it's been a happy story and it's just getting started. So
When you think about the history of St. Andrews, it's not just a list of dates or buildings. It's more like a bucket brigade, a long line of people passing faith, love, and community from one generation to the next. We didn't start this work. We were handed it by those who came before us. People who built these walls, who welcomed neighbors, who kept the lights on through good years and hard years alike. And now the bucket is in your hands. What you do with it matters, not just for today, but for the people who will stand here decades from now. This is your part of the story.
St. Andrews was a mission church that grew out of First Presbyterian Church. First Pres was downtown in Austin at 7th and Lavaca, and it was time to move. The city was growing. So they sent out a mission church to 49th Street. The first meeting was in 1952 at Rosedale Elementary School on 49th Street. The goal was to build a church, and they selected some property on Koenig Lane. Koenig at that time was about the farthest north in Austin you went, and it was a dirt road. But they chose a place there, constructed a building, and opened in 1955.
Well, I had a friend, a minister friend, who said this is like the best church in Austin. And I was thinking of applying to a different church, which has since died. But he said they just have never had good leadership. So they're very conservative, but they're good people. They were dying and they knew it, so they knew they needed something different. And they're more flexible and willing to go out on a limb a little bit. I was apolitical. So we got along just fine. Until we had two women that were sexually assaulted the first year I was here. And so I realized I needed to get involved. And when we were building the new building, I knew it'd be really hard to fire me. So I knew if I was ever going to be edgy and courageous in my life, that this was the time to do it. So, but I'll never forget when I would start preaching on issues that affected politics and stuff. Like we had a woman stand up and say, "Why don't you shut up?" Which is kind of hard to take into the sermon. And then we had a man who called for my resignation after one of the sermons. So it had a texture to it that was interesting.
There was a call for a dismissal of Jim, and we had the group in the congregation stand up, and one group went to one side of the room and one group went to the other side of the room. And I just sat there not being able to believe what I was seeing, that we were physically doing this to ourselves. There was pain there, some real good friends that we had come to know and love over the years. So those kinds of things kept coming up. We would grow a little bit, and then we'd shrink, and then we'd grow a little bit more, and then we'd shrink.
So we finally voted to move up here and build something new. So we stayed in a temporary building. So it was a challenge, but it was also a very happy time. So when all you've got is each other and the building is inadequate, it's a metal building. And if it rains during the sermon, we're going to have to stop, because it's going to be too loud to hear it. So the congregation began to take the message more seriously than the building. And we had after we built the new building and everybody was so excited, there was a meeting at the session where they voted that even if we lost the building, even if I couldn't be the minister anymore, that they were going to do the right thing. They were going to not only include LGBTQ people, but also stand up for them and treat people with full respect. And that's when I knew there's nothing that could stop it.
I got involved with St. Andrews during the time that I was on part-time staff at Metropolitan Community Church, and we were doing funeral services for guys who had died of AIDS because their home church would not allow the funeral in their church. And at that same time, St. Andrews was putting crosses all over the hillside outside, representing deaths from AIDS in Travis County. And they were holding a service. It was a celebration of life, and people came, and at the end, the bagpipes played Amazing Grace, and we all walked out to the field and decorated crosses in memory of our loved ones. Jim invited anybody who wanted to come up and speak, and I jokingly say that I nearly knocked him over. And I told him I didn't think I'd ever get a chance to stand in a Presbyterian pulpit again. And at that point, I could not be ordained in the Presbyterian church because I was a lesbian. And I was out to the presbytery, which made it even harder. I decided that I needed to check out St. Andrews because they claimed to be an open and welcoming church. So I came several Sundays, and then one Sunday, I happened to be sitting next to Peggy Rackley, and she said, "Where do you know Jim from?" And I said, "Well, I've known of Jim since before I went to seminary." And she said, "You went to seminary?" I said, "Yeah." "And you graduated?" "Yeah." "Well, why aren't you up there with them instead of down here with us?" And I thought, okay, this church says they're open and welcoming. And I said, "Well, the Presbyterian church frowns on ordaining lesbians." And she said, "That's not a problem here. I mean, you got to join that church." And over the years, no matter the cost to the church, this church continued to stand up for the disenfranchised and the voiceless. And it did mean a considerable cost several times. The first one was over abortion, and they lost a big chunk of the big givers, and they struggled for several years. And then it was the LGBT issue. They lost some more then. And then it was inclusive language, in which we lost the entire choir.
And part of the problem was each time we shrunk, some money would go away. Now, of course, we've never been about money. It was particularly tight for some times there. There were times that the staff didn't get paychecks. We were running that close to budget. And we were looking for ways to bring in money, whatever we could. So I was on the finance committee, and one thing that we pushed for was passing the offering plate during the Christmas Eve service. Well, Jim was just horrified by that idea. This is a religious, and this time is holy and sacred. Jim, get over it. We're not going to make a big pitch. We're not going to get up and beg for money. We just want to pass the plate. People may want to leave something for the church. So the first Christmas Eve service that we did this, Jim gets up and says, "Now we're going to pass the offering plates," and something to the effect of, "Now, you don't have to give anything, and please, if you can't afford to, don't. And in fact, if you need something, you can take something out." And I'm in the back of the room going, "Oh my God, Jim."
I must say, the first time I came, I was totally turned off. Also, I predicted the Beatles wouldn't make it either. So, but I was totally turned off by the looks of the place. It looked like it was very country. It looked shabby. All of us were coming and going for about 6 months. Laura said, "Get past all that and listen to the words." And I went, "Oh yeah." The words are much more important. People have told me I put my stamp on the church in physical ways, in the physical appearance of the church. And I was asked to do it. People said, I had no background. I have no architectural background, design background. I have none of that. I'm a soap salesman. But I'm a project organizer, so I was good at that. But we decided that, we wanted to continue with our missions of serving people who needed service. We expanded our kitchen. We expanded our shower ministry. And then one of our church administrators, Wendy Valdez, got us to work with the Austin Food Bank and the Central Texas Food Bank. And that expanded into a diaper service, which is phenomenal. And one day I said, well, we need to continue changing. And I said, I'm not sure who's interested in this or not. I'm going to make an announcement that on the third Sunday, whoever's interested, we're going to put together a group to say, like, what's the future, physical, of St. Andrews. Whoever interested, please, come in. We'll talk about it. 70 people showed up. I was like, wait a minute. But it became the Long Range Planning Committee. And those are the folks who we met with every committee of the church to say, what do you need? What do you want? What do you think? And we came together from that. We got with an architect, and we came together with a plan for the church. And I was here every day for 6 months with a hard hat and a vest, safety vest, and I worked with the construction crew. The more I listen to the news, I get more and more dedicated to the fact that this flame cannot go out. This is a message that needs a place. It needs a safe place. It needs an open place that people can come in and be safe, can come in and be different, come in and be themselves. And that's what keeps me going.
At that point, according to the Book of Order, I could not do any leadership position in any church because I was a lesbian. I couldn't teach Sunday school. I couldn't lead worship. I couldn't take up the collection. I couldn't do anything. And so we just wanted the full inclusion. And by saying ordination, that eliminates all those other things. Most of the stuff that we did over that initially was dealing with the greater church. So we were going to general assemblies. Every year we did something. And back then, General Assembly was every year. And then it started passing a General Assembly, but failing out in the presbyteries. So then we started working we knew which presbyteries were voting against it. And we were looking at those presbyteries. Who do we know in that presbytery that we can talk to and help support them in personing this issue for their presbytery? And we started doing that all over the country. At one point, people with authority in presbytery came to Jim and offered to let him keep the church and the property if he would just leave the Presbyterian church. That's how badly they wanted us out. We were such a thorn in their sides. And finally, it passed easily. And we're a better church. Even on a national level, we're a better church for it.
Since I showed up, people have asked me what I wanted St. Andrews to be. And I'm much more concerned with how we do things than what we do. And I don't think it's my job to steer. I think if you're going to have a democratic process, then the elected leadership makes that decision. But I want it to be kind. I want it to aim at universal human rights. I don't know what the church needs to become. In 20 years, did you say? I don't know that I'll be here for that. I guess I won't probably. So, unless they taxidermy, which can very tastefully be done, I think, where I'm at the time.
only answer is love. That's it. I don't care what the question is. The answer is love.